Here are your hosts, Kyle Fellows and Andrew Mertig. This is the Draft Fellows Podcast.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of the Draft Fellows Podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows, and together we form the Draft Fellows. Make sure to follow our channel on YouTube, or you can check out the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Today is our second part of the AFC South Draft Review. If you want to check out the other divisions we've covered, or episode 9 with the Texans and Jaguars draft reviews, follow the channel or the audio podcast. Kyle, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I cannot believe that we are already on episode 10 of this little venture that we began. So it's been fun. This has been a dream come true just to kind of get this started. And it's late June, man. I can't believe the summer is just flying by already. It's crazy. How are you?
Yeah, it's wild to really think about. I mean, just from a personal standpoint, how quickly the year has gone by.
Yeah.
But then, from a football standpoint, we are right around the corner. It's going to be July very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, we're into minicamp, and the Hall of Fame games late July this year.
Oh, yeah.
So
really? That's crazy. Yeah.
I think so. I don't know.
Okay.
I have to check schedules. There's always right on the board
Sure.
there. But
yeah.
Football is right around the corner.
Yeah. It is super close. And we are here to get you ready for that coming season with a little bit more look into what's happened in this draft class from April and how these teams are changing coming into this upcoming 2024 season. So today we continue our look into the AFC South. We're talking Indianapolis, the Colts, and we're talking about the Titans and their draft class. So let's jump right in here, Andrew, and kick it off with the Colts.
Yeah, so the Colts in the first round with pick 15 take Laiatu Latu, the edge out of UCLA. In the second round, they grab wide receiver Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. In the third, they go offensive tackle Matt Goncalves out of Pittsburgh. In the fourth round, they take Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin. And then in the fifth round, they have 3 picks, wide receiver Anthony Gould, safety Jalen Carleys, and another safety Jalen Simpson. Sixth round, cornerback Micah Abraham. I just tried to combine those two names into one. And then the seventh round, defensive tackle Jonah Laulu.
That's my favorite one.
Okay. Yeah, some good names in this class.
Yeah, great names in this class. Yeah. So let's start at the top. Yeah. Laiatu Latu, I mean, the buzz around him was all about the injury, right? Is this a player who can hold up in the NFL? Super interesting path. Started his career at Washington as a 4-star recruit. In 2019, significant neck injury. He was told his career was over, right? This was the end of the road. Football was fun. We're not doing this anymore. Fast forward 2022, he is cleared. He plays for UCLA. He's an All-American in 2022 and 2023. 2023 becomes the Ted Hendricks Award winner as the best defensive end in the country. So just a really cool path for Latu. Now we're talking NFL. We're talking how does he translate? But for just a personal story of what he overcame is pretty remarkable. But where did you have Latu in this class?
Yeah, and I just want to say that it's so hard to hear his story and not think about Jalen Phillips. Because Jalen Phillips started at UCLA, where Latu finished. He medically retires, transfers to Miami, gets drafted. Everybody's like, we know this guy's super talented, but is he going to have a long career? Is he even going to be able to suit up? What's going to happen? And then he just keeps getting better in Miami. And so, you hope that is the path forward for Latu, who is so promising on tape. I had him as my 18th overall player, but I just did some simple math. I do try to factor in people who have obvious injury concerns that we know about, right? Obviously we're not getting medicals from the combine, but if I hadn't taken off the points that I did for Latu for the medical, he would have jumped up to the 10th overall player on the board. So I loved him. I thought his tape was phenomenal. He's a little bit older. He's 23, obviously dealing with those injury concerns, but still tested really, really well. I thought his pass rush moves were as advanced as we've seen in this draft class for sure, and probably that we've seen in several years. I think he plays with a ton of effort, plays with a ton of hustle, really outstanding quickness, uses great leverage. He looks fine against tight ends in the run game. Against offensive linemen, he can get washed out a little bit. So I'd like to see that play strength and leverage improve a little bit shorter arms. So he can't always create a lot of separation. And obviously the injury history is a factor, but I think like just on his pass rush moves alone and the refinement, like he's not as athletic as some of the other edges in this class, Dallas Turner, for instance.
Sure.
But he is so beyond every other player in terms of a skill set. Over and over and over, that matters a whole heck of a lot in the NFL. Like Trey Hendrickson, right? Maybe doesn't get the credit that he deserves. One of the better pass rushers in the entire league. Not a super athlete, just like incredible pass rush moves. Great plan, great counters, great with his hands. And I think Latu brings a lot of that to the table.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things post-draft was Chris Ballard's reaction to drafting Latu. And of course, like every team's going to love their own selections, but he's like cackling like an evil villain. And he's like, they let us get the best defensive end in the draft, like at 15 or whatever. So that was a fun moment. But for me, Latu's game is, like you said, this is an advanced hand usage technique player, and that usually translates pretty well in the NFL. But this is a playmaking machine. And I think that that's the underrated piece of him. He shows up around the ball all the time, and it's pretty rare for a pass rusher to come away with multiple interceptions in a season, like because that's just not the position that they play. Latu accomplished that in 2023 with 2 interceptions. He also came away with 2 forced fumbles as well. So this is a guy who shows up around the ball, makes plays on the ball, and impacts the game for his team. So the Colts getting him at 15, I think, is a great selection as long as the medicals hold up, and you hope that they do because his story is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and then in the second round, they grab Adonai Mitchell. And to me, like super intriguing size speed guy. I think, we talked about Brian Thomas Jr. in the last episode for Jacksonville. And, we talked about size and speed there. I think Mitchell, super fluid mover. I like him on the in-breaking routes a lot more than Thomas. But I will say, like, not the ball dominant player that Thomas is. There wasn't a lot of like go up and get it. I thought he was a little passive. There, I thought he struggled with jam coverage a little bit. His blocking was not necessarily something to write home about. So I had him a little bit lower in my rankings. I still think that the middle of the second round, or really the late second round where the Colts got him, is a great, great value. I had him more like 38. But I like him a lot. I think, his development as a potential weapon opposite of Michael Pittman Jr. could be really key to unlocking this offense.
Yeah, this is a player that I think in a couple of years we'll look back and be like, I guess I don't know that I think this, but if there's a player that we look back and we're like, we missed it and he just went way too late, I think Mitchell stands to be that player. He's talked about his own struggle to regulate his diabetes diagnosis and just the challenges of that. Some of that is on him. But if he can get in with a support system that will help him to manage that, I really think that the sky is the limit here for increasing his consistency on the field. I think that's the biggest thing that you're looking for from him is just the consistency, because this is a player that when you look at how he wins, he's good at separating and he's got good hands and he's really good at elevating to the football. And so when you mix all those things together, absolutely could be a huge impact player, but I think the sky's the limit for Adonai Mitchell. There's a couple of offensive linemen here mixed into this draft class. I think we both like Tanner Bortolini a good bit. You're originally from Wisconsin. Is this a Wisconsin homer thing, or is this a really good football player?
Yeah, so you and I talked about this pre-show. I like Bortolini. I actually don't have a very good grade on him. And so that was my mistake. Right. I should have looked first. I'm at 172 overall. And so like that doesn't reflect things. But I will tell you, there is some Wisconsin fan-induced trauma with Bortolini. And that is not because he's not a good player. I think he has all of the tools to be a really, really good interior offensive lineman in the NFL. He's fleet-footed. He moves really well in space, great lateral agility. I think he struggles to maintain blocks, so maybe not that like vice grip that you like to see. So I think he needs to work more in his own blocking scheme. Maybe like he can play guard in the NFL. I think so, because the Colts have a pretty darn good center. Here's where my trauma comes from, Kyle. Do not let this guy snap the ball ever.
Oh, is this the problem?
Oh, he's a floater snapper.
Is snapping the ball something that centers do regularly?
Yeah. No, I will say Wisconsin had a scheme change last year, right? Like new head coach. They're going almost exclusively shotgun. Bortolini struggled big time. His snaps were coming in soft. They were coming in all over the place. The quarterback was having to wait for him. Oftentimes the pass rushers were a step and a half into their pass rush before their quarterback actually caught the snap. There were big time problems here. In Indy, I don't think he's going to have to worry about playing center, at least not early in his career. Maybe it's something that can be fixed. But like as a skill set guy, a lot of promise here.
Absolutely. And I think that what's interesting here, the context there actually fills this out for me, because 2023, I believe, was the first year that he did play center. So a move back to guard makes a ton of sense. And actually, just I love watching the player interviews. Bortolini was one of my favorites. I just thought, this is a guy who's about his business. This is a guy who loves football. Smart dude. This is a 4.0 GPA guy in high school who was recruited by Yale and Harvard. Of course, chose to play football at Wisconsin for athletic, program reasons, but had the intelligence to play at those other programs. And so I think, you get excited about the intelligence that you're adding to your offensive line, some of the things that you could ask him to do as a pulling guard if you put him back into that role as a guard. So in the fourth round, this could absolutely pay dividends for the Colts for sure. But Anthony Gold, really just quick mention here, if we're kind of looking through the rest of this draft class of somebody who could pop. Obviously, the Colts have a lot of offensive firepower. I think you're still excited about, Pittman. You're excited about the guy they got from North Carolina last year.
Oh, Josh Downs.
I think he'll still, he factors in probably as your slot. So I don't know that Gold sees the field immediately, but there's a skill set here, special teams, as well as he can return punts, that I think could be really valuable to this team. But great interview player, grew up in a military home, loves playing special teams, which is going to be, like I said, where he's going to, make his money, but super small players. Like, so jitterbug, 4.3 speed, but he's going to be that gadget kind of player on offense and then be your special teams contributor. But I think a player that Colts fans will probably fall in love with for the role that he plays.
Yeah, that's fun. And, somebody that gives them a little bit different skill set than they have with even like their depth players like Alec Pierce. Can play a little bit different. We'll see. Maybe he gets an opportunity in the new kick return game to be really special in that as well. So we like what the Colts did. And so we'll transition over to the Tennessee Titans, a little bit smaller draft class here. In the first round, they take offensive tackle J.C. Latham out of Alabama at pick 7. In the second round, they get defensive lineman and mammoth human being Tavondre Sweat out of Texas. In the fourth, linebacker Cedric Gray from North Carolina. In the fifth, cornerback Jarvis Brownlee Jr. from Louisville. In the sixth, wide receiver Jaquan Jackson. In the seventh, 2 picks, safety James Williams, and edge Jalen Harrell. You want to start out with Latham?
Yes, and this is my turn to be pretty low on a player, I think, and I don't know where you ended up with Latham, but he was my offensive tackle 7 in this class, which I think is probably a relative hot take for where he went and for where other people had him valued, but didn't love him. I know why people like him. Huge guy, powerful, impactful in the run game, good pass blocker. He almost looks bored at times because of how easy things come to him because of how big he is and like just his extension, and he's just pushing people off of him because he looks bored out there. Also, but for me at the same time, there was almost an internal clock for JC Latham where he felt like at this point in the play, the ball should be out by now, and then I'm punching the clock and I'm done. And if he had just given it another second of effort into that play, maybe the outcome of the play is different. And I'm sure he would have been surprised. He's like, that wasn't the way that the play was supposed to go. But it just kind of seemed like he was just getting out of that play a little bit faster than maybe I wanted him to. He did struggle with some penalties, and he struggled with a bull rush at time, which is super odd given how strong he is. But he is super young, so that's always the caveat that like maybe there's some upside here. Work these things out. But for me, maybe it was something I ate that day. I just didn't have J.C. Latham as high as some other people did in this draft class.
Yeah, I am at 13 overall, offense tackle 3.
There you go.
So I really liked him a lot, but I can tell you the things that I'm concerned about. The things that I love, he is a huge human being. He's got physical tools that very few other humans on this planet have, right? Like he's everything you want in an offensive tackle from that regard. The things that concern me is like he is really over aggressive. And I don't mean like he's throwing punches at the other team, but like in pass sets, he very rarely was comfortable just dropping and letting the pass rusher come to him. He was almost moving forward like a run blocker in passing situations at times. And you just can't do that. The edges in the NFL will eat you for lunch if you don't settle in. And then you have to hold your anchor, right? Like you mentioned, even though he's incredibly strong, he did get rocked back from time to time. In the run game, he should be a unbelievably dominant player, but he's not always happy just like riding a guy out of the play. He was always going for the kill shot. Like, I don't know if he was trying to make a mixtape or beef up his YouTube highlights or something, but like just ride the guy out of the play and let your running back have a hole.
Right.
Like we know you are capable of doing that. You don't need to deplete him. It's all right to sometimes just hold up and be a steady blocker. But I think those things are correctable. And I do think, it makes all the sense in the world. Now, do the Titans probably wish Joe Alt would have fallen into their laps? Yeah, I think so too. I think this was a little bit early for Latham. I think they could have maybe done like a mini trade down, but they wanted their guy and they certainly got him there. Second round, this is real interesting. T'Vondre Sweat. So this was a guy, maybe a run first, maybe a run only kind of defender. And then we have the off the field issues that pop up right before the draft.
Yeah, I, spilled the beans that I didn't love Latham. So when you combine Latham and T'Vondre Sweat as the headliners of this draft class, I did not love what the Titans did early. Luckily, they did some pretty cool things a little bit later in this draft class that, for me, redeem it a little bit. But T'Vondre Sweat, I love the player interviews, and so he was fascinating, like, to listen to. Like, I just I didn't like flag him as like someone I was like really worried about, but I was like, just some odd comments from this guy and like kind of defensive about some strange things like his weight, like when asked about like what he played at and like what he thought his ideal playing weight was and things like that. And kind of made a comment about like how he can't sit around for a week because if he does, then he'll like throw on 30 pounds and like, it was kind of just like bizarre things that he divulged that he probably didn't need to, that like made you have more questions. So it's just kind of this interesting road for him. And then I literally like was 2 days after I watched him, was like, this is a fascinating guy. Wonder what he's going to be like. It came out that he had some of the off the field issues pop up in the lead up to the draft. So unfortunate path for him. Hopefully he learns from those mistakes. But huge player, like can absolutely plug up the middle of the defense. My biggest on-field reservation with Sweat was I felt like he was a little sluggish off the snap, and given his size, like that's probably going to be the case. But I don't know in the NFL if he can get away with just that slow rise out of his stance the way that he did at Texas because of how active offensive linemen are in the NFL. So we will see. But at 38, the Titans are certainly signing up to find out.
Yeah, I had him at 61 overall, and that was before the off-the-field stuff. Yeah. I did not adjust at all for that. So I was thinking he was like a mid-late second-round guy already before that, and I'm sure some teams probably removed him from the board or pushed him way down after. So I was really surprised to see him go at 38. I think this is a guy who is an elite level run defender. Mm-hmm. But all of the concerns that you mentioned just now, and I think for the Titans to get the most out of him, they probably need Sweat to play more in the like 330, 340 range than the 360 range. I think he has all of the athletic tools. If he can slim down a little bit, he can still be a major force in the middle of your run defense. But then I think, he's going to probably be healthier. He's probably going to be able to play more snaps. He's going to be less winded when he's on the field. And there was some of that where he just like played upright. And it's like, that's fine in college. You can just be bigger and stronger. Not going to work in the NFL. And so I think all of those things lead me to hope that, he can shed a little weight. I think he can be a pocket pusher in the pass game. I don't think he's necessarily a guy you have to take off the field on third down, but I think early in his career, he's definitely going to be taken off the field. I think eventually he can settle in and push some guards and centers around and create a little bit of discomfort for the quarterback in their face. But long term, his value is as a run defender, and it's interesting to see that at pick 38. Really is.
It is, and checking in at 366 at the combine is like the big question mark. Like, can
after
we get that
he
down?
didn't weigh in previously, he opted not to weigh in at the Senior Bowl.
Right.
So we thought, okay, well, he's shedding weight.
Right.
And then
it's going to get better. And then it was 366. So we're like, and then that's when he was kind of defensive. And he's like, no, I feel really comfortable. So we're like, what were you at the Senior Bowl? It's a very fascinating discussion. And it'll be a super interesting player to watch, see how he impacts the game because he's very talented. Cedric Gray, fascinating player here. Exciting player. Probably would have been one of my favorite linebackers in this class. Still really like the player. My biggest hesitation was the tackling consistency and a linebacker that is important, but good instincts, sees it really well. Love the interviews. I think this is going to be a team leader, kind of a guy who moves really well in zone. And so I love the player. What did you think of Cedric Gray? And I mean, at 106, what did you think of that value?
Yeah, I had him at linebacker 3 overall, 58. Absolutely love Cedric Gray. Elite movement skills. I think he plays really hard. He is excellent as a quarterback spy. Not a lot of that on tape, but when he did it, he was so good. That's obviously super valuable, especially playing in a division with Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence. Maybe not all great scramblers, but to have a guy who can mirror that, also some pretty good running backs and tight ends in that division as well. I wish he had more coverage reps, but he looked really natural when he did it. I think he could be a pretty good blitzer in the future, but just you have to keep blockers off of him. And so, we mentioned Devondre Sweat. That's a pretty good player to have in front of you. We know about Jeffrey Simmons, right? One of the better defense tackles. They're going to try to keep him clean. And I think that's the strategy going forward because I think he could be really, really, really good in that role. Maybe a Matt Milano level linebacker. Eventually in this league where we were like, wow, this guy is going to make some Pro Bowls if he can reach that potential. If he's got the front in front of him to keep him clean, he's got the athleticism to do it. Got to improve the tackling. And you were spot on there.
Yeah, so they got a lot of day 3 picks here. Just one more quick shout out here. We don't usually get deep in the weeds on 7th round picks, but I am a big fan of Jalen Harrell. And I know I'm a Michigan fan, so this is a little bit of a homer pick here. But I dove pretty deep into the edge position for this class. I did not actually like Jalen Harrell a whole heck of a lot as a defensive end. Kind of a vanilla player. If he stays there, he's probably going to be a career depth piece. But to me, there's a lot here that makes me curious if he could be someone who would move to an off-ball linebacker kind of a player. He's just really good at reading, reacting, shedding blocks, even dropping into coverage when he was asked to do it. So for me, that's a player I kind of want to see. We don't see a lot of 250-pound linebackers in the league anymore. But I don't know, maybe when you're playing defensive end, you probably play up to that weight, right? Maybe he could shed a little bit of weight there too. But this is a guy who's 21 years old, and he was a senior. So a lot of people thought this is a guy who was older and maybe not have a lot of developmental upside. So he was a senior, but he was a 21-year-old senior. So I just think there's some upside there. An interesting note, Jalen's father, James, played linebacker in the NFL for both the Lions and the Chiefs. So there's some lineage there. at that position as well. So maybe the Titans see him as a defensive end, and there's nothing to this. But for me, I was just like, the instincts are there, the movement skills are there. I kind of think maybe his NFL career could take off if they moved him to linebacker.
Yeah, and it's not unheard of. I know not a lot of NFL teams are doing this, but to do a little bit of both. And
Yeah.
so, we saw years and years of success with the Patriots doing it. But you even think about a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel, right? He's kind of an off-ball linebacker. He's kind of an edge defender. He does a little bit of both. In aggressive defensive schemes, I think you can use players like that. I had Harrell as my 79th overall player. I really liked him a lot. So I think, that versatility is something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we like these draft classes a good bit. I ripped on the Titans a little bit early, but I do think they did some nice things late. And the Colts, I think, did some nice things to help themselves out on the offensive side of the ball late in the draft. And then, of course, got the impact player in Latu to kick things off. So it'll be fascinating to see the impact there in the AFC South, as well as around the NFL throughout this season as we watch these players progress. But thanks for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show, and we will continue our journey through each division in football over the next couple of weeks. From the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have you covered. So until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.